Hello, I'm Tracy from MeatRx. I'm a MeatRx coach, and today I'm here with William. Hi, William.
Hi.
Thank you for coming on. We're continuing with our success podcast, and we want to hear all about your success with carnivore. Can you tell me what your diet was like before carnivore and what kind of health conditions you had?
So diet before carnivore was probably I would say standard American diet, but it probably wasn't quite that bad. So I don't have a way of proving that, but I think I was raised on a little less sugar than maybe some of my peers that were born in 1974. But my mom was still victimized by the low fat craze, and I distinctly remember being about maybe 6 years old, and that was the end of bacon, for more than a decade. So it was kind of low fat, just maybe without the sugar being quite as bad. But by the time I was 43, apple fritters are my favorite thing in the world, and I probably put a good 2, if not 3 inches on my waist, since the time I was in college. And in retrospect, I can definitely see how the sugar and the grain was ramping up and up and up and up. And I've never been hangry per se, but I can definitely admit now that periodically I would house half a dozen donuts, because it was after work and I was tired and frustrated. So probably a teeny tiny version of hangry. So that, I guess that's a long way of saying, like, standard American, maybe not quite as bad, but close to it.
Okay. Did you have any ill effects from eating standard American?
So none that were diagnosed, right? But a couple things again that I can think about in retrospect. Several years ago, so I wasn't yet 40, and I was deployed in Kuwait, and I asked one of my fellows that was with me in orthopod, funnily enough, that if I needed to be concerned that my knees hurt all the time, because I was trying to be in shape and out running a few times a week. And that I remember now that guy told me, are you almost 40? And I said yes. And he said, are you active? And I said yes. He said, then your knees hurt. And he just kind of made it sound like this is just your life, from now on. And then a couple of years after that, I looked my wife in the eye and said, I'm retired from running because my knees hurt all the time. And I'm a competitive rower, and my knees didn't hurt that much if I rode, but still I had now ditched any kind of running from my life, in order to avoid knee pain. Another undiagnosed condition I had in retrospect, and using my doctor brain, I think there's no logical way that I put almost 3 inches on my waist without insulin resistance. So it never had a blood sugar that got me tagged, by a primary care doctor. Never had, anything that far out of whack. Maybe my blood pressure, like, on the verge of being high once in a while, and a little bit of maybe chronic indigestion, depending. But again, never anything that got me put on a drug or anything like that.
Okay. Well, how did you come to the carnivore diet? What was that procedure, and did you have any difficulties?
I didn't. So I alluded when we were talking a little earlier that my wife is a marathoner, and I never was thrilled with the sugar packets, the cake frosting that marathoners eat, every 40 minutes or so. But I also recognized her terrible fear of crashing, 18 miles in. So I never went after her too hard for it. I just didn't like it. And then one day, for no reason, she asked me, what is this keto diet thing that she'd seen on the internet? And I remarked, it's like, I learned it in medical school, which I thought every doctor learned it in medical school. I guess not every doctor learns it in medical school, but I learned it in medical school. I knew all about using a ketogenic diet for intractable seizures. So I'm telling my wife this, and I'm like, you want to try it? And, she says, I don't really see myself giving up beer. And then, she thought about it for a couple of weeks, and I know that's her process. And I would say about 2 weeks later, she looks at me and says, we're doing this. She wants to go on a ketogenic diet. And I'm delighted to eat steak and butter. So I had, zero objections whatsoever. So we both started that. That would have been about June of 2018. And then I had no trouble. In 2004, when I was on a combat deployment and everybody called it the Atkins diet, then I did that because it was easy to go to the chow hall and just eat meat and cheese. And I never had any trouble then. I knew I didn't have a way of measuring ketones. I knew I'd gone into ketosis when I could smell nail polish remover, wafting up, from my body because there was so much acetone coming out of me. And I never had the sickness, which I think that also has a lot to do with maybe not being that sugary when I was a little boy. So I wasn't necessarily that carbohydrate dependent, so I could flip fairly easily. My wife did get sick, but she was over it in a day. And then I would say within 3 months, right on time, her running was back up to baseline. And ever since then, now she can run a full marathon without a scrap of carbohydrate. And her pre-race meal is now a giant steak. So that, going back to how carnivore started, where a ketogenic diet, both of us had an interest in Dr. Baker, me particularly because I'm a rower, right? So I'm like, who is this guy that can pull 500 meters in, under a minute and a quarter, which I never, on my best day in college, I never did that. So it's, I'm impressed. And we got more and more interested in it. And then once again, my wife kind of drove the train and said, we're doing this. So it was about November of 2018 that I said, this is a perfect time to do a 4-week experiment because between Thanksgiving and Christmas, no one will bother us about what we're eating, because we're in between these big holiday times. So we started a strict diet of nothing but steak for 4 weeks. And it was, I would say 3 weeks in, my darling wife was halfway into a ribeye and looked at me and said, I never want to stop this. So that's how it happened. So now it's been since November of 2018, and now it's almost April of 2020. So it's getting on almost a full year and a half, and it's been pretty strict carnivore, like meat, salt, coffee, and then once in a great while, socially, I think we've each had a little scrap of salad here and there.
Oh yeah. Wow, that's amazing. So you had a few conditions before carnivores, and can you tell me how those improved after carnivore?
Yes. Number one, and this is why now I feel a little embarrassed that the doctor didn't diagnose himself. The inches on my waist went away in the blink of an eye. So I'm very expensive, had to buy all new pants, but I'm firmly back to my college size. I probably lost 30 pounds. I've gained more than half of that back, but the waist stayed the same. Mm-hmm. So now it's been, lost that belly fat, lost what was, pushing my waist out to a 36, 37. I'm back to a 34, but deadlifting more than I ever did before. So I've clearly put on some lean mass and still managed to keep the waist. So I'm super excited about that. And then I don't have a way of knowing that I had insulin resistance before, but I got some labs drawn actually almost exactly a year ago, and the fasting insulin was down around 1. So that whatever it was, and I'm pretty sure it wasn't 1, now it's 1. And the CRP marker of inflammation, that's down, almost completely in the floor, and the fasting blood sugar is perfect. So that all, is excellent. I'm super happy with that. The other thing that I truly did not expect is that I can run as much as I please. My knees don't hurt at all. And that's, at 200, almost 220 pounds. And I can go out in flat shoes and run sprints, all morning, and I don't really have any knee pain. So it's been wonderful to be completely free of that.
Wow. Yeah, that is great. So it wasn't just aging then?
Apparently not. Apparently you don't have to start giving up activities when you're 45 years old. Who knew?
Yeah. So have you ever caught up with Dr. Baker on the rowing?
I'm dying to. First of all, like Long Beach, where he is roughly, if I remember correctly, that has got to be hands down one of the top five most beautiful places in the country to row. I've raced there. I rode with the San Diego Rowing Club while I was still on active duty in the Navy, and I was stationed out there. And I mean, racing through the marinas in Long Beach was probably one of the more spectacular courses I've ever raced in my life. And in a dream world, if I could ever get Dr. Baker in a boat and the two of us in a double. And I think that I don't even know if we'd really have to row because I think our competitors would just quit.
Yeah.
It's like I'm usually the biggest guy on my team. If I was standing next to Dr. Baker on the boat, then suddenly I'd be the runt. I'm about 6'3" and 220, and he'd be the big guy. So that with his strength and what he can do, if he could translate that in a boat, that'd be a sight to see.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it's been wonderful meeting you, William, and I sure appreciate you telling us all about your story. And it should be loaded up on YouTube in a couple of weeks, and everybody will enjoy it and benefit from it.
Well, thank you very much. I was really excited to do this.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.